A quiet school janitor catches the eye of a ruthless cartel, but what they don't know about him could change everything. Who is the man they've decided to target, and how far will he go to protect the life he's built? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. Your take might just match the shocking truth that's about to unfold. Leonard Tramiel's hands moved with a steady rhythm as he mopped the hallway floor, the old strings swishing against polished tiles. His frame, lean but deceptively strong beneath a worn gray work shirt, hunched slightly, the posture of a man who had spent years training himself to seem smaller, less noticeable. Kids' laughter echoed faintly from classrooms, teachers' voices rising and falling in the timeless cadence of lessons, but Leonard heard every detail: the squeak of shoes, the click of lockers, the breathing patterns of the hall monitors. He wasn't just mopping floors, he was listening, cataloging, preparing. It wasn't paranoia, it was habit. Leonard Tramiel had spent decades teaching others how to kill without hesitation and disappear without trace. Today he blended into the harmless figure of a janitor at Westbridge Elementary School, just another cog in the background of suburban life. He finished the section, wrung the mop out in the bucket, and pushed the cart back toward the custodial closet. As he closed the door behind him, he heard the faint sound of a vehicle's engine idling outside the school, a low, heavy growl, different from the usual steady hum of parent pickups or school buses. His jaw tightened a fraction. Then he released it. Normal people didn't notice those things. Normal people didn't need to. Leonard grabbed a rag and a bottle of cleaner and started on the glass trophy case near the front office. Each swipe of the cloth revealed small smudges and fingerprints left by admiring students. As he wiped, his sharp eyes caught a glimpse through the front windows. A black SUV parked across the street, engine still running. Inside, silhouettes, watching. The cleaning rag moved in a slow, deliberate circle. In another life, Leonard would have already moved into action, assessing, countering, eliminating. But that man, that weapon, was supposed to be gone, buried under layers of civilian life, hidden behind the facade of a man who quietly fixed leaky faucets and unstuck vending machines. The children needed to be safe, and that meant he needed to stay invisible. At least that's what he told himself. Across the street, inside the blackout vehicle, Miko Sanchez leaned back in the driver's seat, chewing a toothpick between his teeth. His dark eyes tracked the school, the people coming and going. Ordinary folks, mothers with strollers, teachers bustling with papers. None of them mattered. Only one man inside that school was of interest. "You sure it's him?" asked Reuben, sitting in the passenger seat, his fingers tapping an anxious rhythm on his thigh. Miko's lip curled into a smirk. "Yeah, old man fits the description. Nobody looks twice at the janitor." He flipped open a manila folder resting on the dashboard. Inside were photos, grainy but clear. Leonard pushing a mop, Leonard changing a light bulb, Leonard smiling faintly at a small child who had dropped their books. Mundane. Perfect cover. You perfect. The cartel didn't care about his cover. Orders were orders. Leonard Tramiel had interfered once, years ago, dismantling an operation in South America that had taken years to build. They'd learned then that he was no ordinary agent. But they hadn't been able to find him after he'd ghosted out of the CIA's hands. Now he was within reach. Miko's orders were simple. Neutralize him. Make it clean, make it silent. No witnesses. He turned the key in the ignition, the SUV rumbling quietly as he pulled away from the curb. Tomorrow, they'd make their move. Back inside, Leonard stored away the cleaning supplies and walked the halls one last time before the final bell. His steps were unhurried, deliberate. He nodded at Mrs. Ramirez, the young second-grade teacher, and held the door open for Mr. Kinney, the grizzled old gym coach. Both smiled and thanked him without thinking twice. Exactly how Leonard wanted it. By the time the students flooded into the hallways, pouring out of classrooms like a dam had burst, Leonard was already outside by the maintenance shed, sweeping gravel back into place near the playground. He preferred being outside during dismissal. He could see better. And he had sensed something, a ripple, in the ordinary. Leonard's eyes scanned the street again. No black SUV now, just minivans and sedans and the occasional hybrid, parents flashing smiles and waving to their kids. Still, the sensation in his gut lingered, a low hum he couldn't shake. Years of instincts didn't just fade. He finished sweeping and made his way back inside. Tonight he would check his perimeter, see if any of the cameras he had secretly installed around the school, cameras no one knew existed, had picked up anything unusual. It was supposed to be over. He had made his peace with it, left it all behind. Leonard Tramiel closed the last classroom door and locked it, his reflection flashing briefly in the glass panel. For a moment he caught sight of the man he used to be, the one who moved like a shadow, who ended threats before they ever started, the one who had trained the best, and sometimes the worst. He turned away, locking the thought inside. Tomorrow would be just another day. At least, that's what he told himself again. But across town, in a dimly lit motel room, Miko and his crew were already laying out their weapons, silencing pistols and loading knives into ankle sheaths. They spoke little, their faces tense with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. And Pasco to join them. One of them, a wiry young thug named Tito, glanced over at Miko, voice low. "You sure about this man? He looks old. But they say he trained ghosts." Miko snorted, tossing a pistol onto the bed. "Old men don't scare me." Tito didn't answer. He just looked away, pretending not to hear the small, cold voice in his own head that whispered, "You're making a mistake." Leonard Tramiel sat in the corner booth of a near-empty diner just off Main Street, nursing a black coffee that had long since gone cold. He liked this spot. Small, quiet, and the staff had learned early on that Leonard wasn't one for conversation. The clink of a spoon against ceramic, the low murmur of a baseball game on the radio above the counter, the shuffle of a bored waitress wiping tables down. Normalcy surrounded him, but the feeling inside his chest wasn't normal at all. It was tight, coiled, waiting. He tapped a finger lightly against the coffee mug, not looking when the front door chimed open. Instead, he watched the reflection in the diner's greasy window as two figures entered. Young, clean-cut in a way that didn't quite fit the town's easy-going atmosphere. Tight jeans, polished boots, brand-new leather jackets that hadn't seen a real day's work. Leonard didn't flinch. He stirred his coffee once, watching them out of the corner of his eye as they took a seat 3 booths away. Too close. Too deliberate. The waitress, Becky, a college kid who liked to pretend she didn't recognize trouble, smiled awkwardly as she handed them menus. Leonard caught the subtle way her smile slipped when the bigger one, a shaved-head bruiser with a spider tattoo on his hand, ordered without looking at the menu. Like he didn't care what this place served, only that he had a reason to linger. Leonard stood up slowly, leaving a $10 bill on the table even though his coffee cost less than $2. He grabbed his coat, slid his arms into it without haste. One of the new arrivals, the smaller one with the nervous energy, glanced up as Leonard walked past, pretending to study the dessert board on the wall. His fingers twitched toward the inside of his jacket. Leonard paused just long enough to let the message sink in. He said them, and if they pushed it, they would regret it. The smaller one froze, a thin sheen of sweat breaking across his forehead despite the air conditioning. Leonard gave him nothing more than a cool, indifferent glance and stepped out into the afternoon sun. Behind him, the diner door jingled once, twice, and then slammed as the two strangers exited a few moments later. They didn't follow immediately. They weren't that foolish yet. Leonard walked down the sidewalk, his pace unhurried, his breathing steady. His mind, though, raced with calculations. 2 scouts, testing the waters, maybe waiting for confirmation. They wouldn't strike here, too many witnesses, but they were close, closer than he'd thought. He turned the corner and ducked into an alley, moving between 2 dumpsters until he reached the back loading dock of a hardware store. He crouched, pulling a slim, battered cell phone from his pocket. No GPS, no apps, just numbers, carefully memorized and encrypted through codes only a few living people would recognize. He punched in a sequence. A single ring. then silence. Seconds later, the line connected. "You've reached Red Bird Services," a robotic voice answered. Leonard didn't hesitate. "Echo 4, Shadow Protocol, confirm standing assets." There was a pause. A deeper voice came on the line, less robotic but cold and clinical. "Authentication confirmed. Shadow Protocol acknowledged. Assets minimal in your current location. Nearest primary backup is 6 hours out." Leonard closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, calculating the odds. 6 hours could be 6 lifetimes in a situation like this. Understood. Standing orders? Evade. Minimize collateral. Preserve civilian integrity. Leonard ended the call and crushed the phone under his bootio, grinding it into the gravel until it was nothing but shards and plastic dust. No ties, no traces, just the way he had taught it. He stood, brushing his hands off on his jeans, and resumed walking down the alley. His face, when he emerged back onto the main street, was the same mask of quiet disinterest it always was, but beneath the surface, every nerve was on edge, every instinct sharpened to a razor's edge. The scouts were gone when he passed the diner again, but Leonard knew better than to think they'd given up. They would report back to whoever was running them. The next move would come fast, likely tonight. He needed to be ready. At the school, Leonard went through his usual end-of-day checklist, making sure the alarms were set and the doors locked tight. But tonight, he did one extra thing. He accessed the maintenance shed, a place no one but him had keys to. Inside, past racks of gardening tools and dusty cans of paint, he lifted a false panel in the floor. There, wrapped in oilcloth, lay the tools he had sworn he'd never touch again. A pistol, well-maintained despite the years. A Ka-Bar knife, the same kind issued to field agents decades ago. A compact set of surveillance equipment, cameras, motion sensors, tripwires. Leonard sat back on his haunches, staring at them. He had walked away from this life, had chosen a path of peace, teaching, mentoring in small ways through acts of service, not violence. The children didn't know it, but every squeaky clean floor, every mended locker, every repaired playground slide was his quiet act of penance for the things he had done under the flag of duty. But duty was calling again, not from a government, not from a command center, from a deeper place. He thought of Sofia Pereira, the precocious little girl who stayed late to work on science projects. He thought of old Mrs. Duvall, the secretary who always baked cookies for the staff meetings. He thought of Principal McKinney, who fought budget cuts tooth and nail to keep this school safe and thriving. He thought of the town that had unknowingly given him a second chance. And he thought of what men like Miko Sanchez would do to it if left unchecked. Leonard wrapped the pistol in a clean cloth and slid it into a backpack. He pocketed the Ka-Bar at his belt under the loose folds of his jacket. The surveillance gear would have to wait for now. Tonight was about preparation, not engagement. He left the shed, locking it carefully, and walked toward the edge of the playground. The sun was setting, the world tipping into twilight. In the shadows of the trees beyond the chain-link fence, a figure watched him. Leonard didn't break stride. Didn't look directly, but he changed his path slightly, angling toward the back gate rather than the parking lot. He wanted whoever was watching to think he hadn't noticed. Let them get comfortable. Let them underestimate. As he slipped through the back gate and onto the service road that led into the woods, Leonard allowed himself the barest, faintest smile. The game had begun, and this time, Leonard Tramiel was ready to play. Night settled over Westbridge, the town's easy stillness masking the tension brewing beneath. Leonard Tramiel moved like a wraith through the woods behind the school, every step carefully placed, every breath measured. In his backpack, the tools of his old life clinked softly against one another. Ahead, through the brush, he spotted the faint glow of cigarette embers. He crouched low, steadying his breathing, letting his senses spread out like invisible tendrils. The Cartel scouts were sloppy, too loud, too visible. Their overconfidence hung around them like a thick, choking fog. Leonard watched as one leaned against a tree, exhaling smoke in careless bursts, while the other two paced in lazy circles, their laughter cutting through the night like knives across fabric. Leonard took mental notes. Positioning, body language, lines of sight, he could take them now, silent, final, but he needed information. Who else was coming? How deep was this operation? He slid back into the shadows, retracing his steps to a narrow maintenance path that curved behind the school and emptied near the service road. From here, he could set the traps, delay them, force them to make mistakes. He pulled a coil of fine tripwire from his bag and began working methodically, stringing it low across the narrow trail where moonlight couldn't betray it. If they rushed the school through this path, they'd find themselves tangled and vulnerable. A warning net, not a kill zone. The old Leonard might have set explosives, booby traps. This Leonard would give them a choice. He finished the wire setup and moved toward the rear parking lot, slipping between the shadows of parked buses and delivery trucks. His mind raced ahead, planning fallback points, counter moves. The mop he had carried earlier still rested by the back entrance, left there on purpose. He retrieved it, adjusting his grip. Ordinary, unthreatening. A janitor preparing for another day's work. Inside the school, the lights were off, save for the soft green glow of exit signs and the faint hum of security alarms. Leonard keyed in the override code, a special access he had quietly installed years ago, known only to him. The system accepted it without protest, momentarily disabling motion sensors in critical hallways. He moved quickly to the front office. If they entered, this was where they'd bottleneck. Leonard removed a handful of small metal caltrops, tiny spikes shaped like twisted stars, from a hidden pouch. He scattered them carefully across the main hallway floor, invisible in the gloom. If they ran through blindly, they'd regret it. He stood, breathing deeply, feeling the pulse of the building in the silence, every creak of settling beams, every distant thrum of HVAC units whispered in his ears. He was ready. The first sign of movement came 10 minutes later, a faint clatter of stones beyond the fence line. Leonard's hands tightened around the mop handle instinctively, but he forced himself to stay relaxed. The front doors shuddered slightly as someone tested them, rattling them against the lock. Then, silence. Leonard moved to the corner of the hallway, pressing himself into the shadows. 4 figures slipped through the service entrance at the rear, Miko Sanchez leading the way, his black hoodie pulled low over his face. His crew followed close behind, each one armed, each one buzzing with a twitchy, chaotic energy that Leonard recognized too well. The air around them smelled of sweat, cheap cologne, and violence barely held in check. Miko held up a hand, signaling them to stop. He scanned the darkness, his instincts prickling. Leonard admired that, in a distant, professional way. The younger man had some sense, but not enough. Miko gestured, sending 2 men toward the main hallway, while he and another peeled off toward the classrooms. Leonard smiled inwardly. Divide and conquer. Easier for him. The 2 cartel members assigned to the hallway moved fast, unaware of the caltrops until one of them yelped, stumbling as sharp metal tore through his sneaker and into his foot. He dropped to a knee, cursing in Spanish, his voice ricocheting off the empty walls. His partner spun around, gun raised, searching the gloom, but it was too late for caution now. They were exposed. Leonard moved with practiced grace. He struck from behind, the mop snapping forward like a lance. The tip struck the armed man's wrist with brutal precision, forcing him to drop the weapon with a clatter. Leonard closed the distance in 2 steps, driving the mop's wooden shaft into the man's gut, doubling him over. The injured one tried to rise, blood dripping from his shoe, but Leonard delivered a low sweep with the mop, knocking him flat on his back. Neither would be getting up soon. Leonard retrieved their weapons, clearing the chambered rounds and pocketing the magazines before kicking the guns into a nearby supply closet. 2 down. He heard footsteps pounding toward him. The other 2. Leonard grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall, yanking the safety pin free. As Miko and his last man rounded the corner, he unleashed a blinding cloud of white vapor, filling the hallway with a dense, choking mist. Disoriented, coughing, the cartel men fired blindly, their shots slamming into lockers and shattering trophy case glass. Leonard ducked low, weaving through the fog. He closed on the last henchman first, grabbing his firing arm and twisting it sharply. A wet snap echoed, followed by a scream as the bone broke. Leonard pivoted, bringing his elbow up in a sharp arc, striking the man's temple. He dropped, unconscious, before he hit the ground. Now only Miko remained. Through the thinning mist, Leonard saw him, gun raised, searching desperately. "You think you're a ghost, old man," Miko spat, voice ragged. "You think we didn't come ready?" Leonard said nothing. He simply moved. Miko fired twice, missing wide in the confusion. Leonard closed the distance, his left hand knocking the pistol aside even as his right drove the mop's wooden shaft into Miko's ribs with enough force to lift him off his feet. The younger man grunted, staggered, but didn't fall. Fast, Leonard thought, impressed despite himself. Miko swung wildly, landing a glancing blow across Leonard's jaw. Pain flared, but Leonard absorbed it, twisting Miko's arm into a vicious lock that forced him to the floor. He kept pressure on the joint until Miko's hand spasmed open, the pistol clattering away. Leonard released him, stepping back. Miko rolled onto his hands and knees, coughing, glaring up at Leonard with murderous hatred. "You don't know what you've started," Miko rasped. "You don't know who's coming next." Leonard wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand, calm as ever. "I know enough," he said quietly. "And I know you won't be part of it." Behind them, the distant wail of police sirens began to rise. Fast, urgent. Leonard allowed himself a small nod. Officer Darius Cole had gotten his message after all. Miko lunged one last time, but Leonard sidestepped effortlessly, sending the younger man sprawling across the tile. He stayed down this time, groaning, beaten not just in body but in spirit. Leonard Tramiel stood alone in the hallway, framed by broken glass, the haze of the fire extinguishers swirling around him like mist on a battlefield. His heart pounded, steady and sure. The hunt was far from over. Bigger predators would come sniffing around soon, but tonight, the school and the town was safe. Now, the flashing red and blue lights cast long, jittery shadows against the walls of Westbridge Elementary. Officer Darius Cole crouched near the school's entrance, weapon drawn low, moving with the sharp, economical precision of a man who had seen combat before, trading a uniform for a badge. His boots squeaked softly on the polished floor as he advanced, sweeping each hallway methodically. His radio crackled in his ear with updates, but Darius barely heard them. His focus was narrow, trained. He didn't expect what he found around the first corner. Bodies. Not dead, thank God, but laid out cleanly, incapacitated with a precision that Darius recognized from a lifetime ago. Zip-tied wrists, blood pooling from broken noses and twisted limbs, but all breathing, all relatively intact. He lowered his weapon slightly and frowned. This wasn't the work of some vigilante with a bat. This was surgical. At the end of the hall, past the haze of a recently discharged fire extinguisher, a lone figure leaned against a wall, mop in hand like a staff from some old legend. Leonard Tramiel. For a moment Darius just stared, remembering the dozens of short interactions they'd had over the past year. Leonard fixing a leaky faucet. Leonard nodding once, silently, at a PTA fundraiser. Leonard carrying a toolbox bigger than some of the fifth graders. Never anything to suggest this, never a hint. Darius approached carefully, weapon lowered but ready, the way one would approach a cornered tiger. "You okay, Leonard?" he said quietly, voice steady. Leonard lifted his eyes, cold steel fading into weary recognition. He nodded once. "They won't be hurting anyone else," Leonard said, voice roughened from smoke and effort. Darius holstered his weapon, but didn't relax. His instincts screamed that this was bigger than just a lucky janitor defending himself. You want to tell me what happened here? Darius asked, jerking his head toward the unconscious cartel men. Leonard looked down at the mop, still clutched loosely in his hand, and gave a humorless smile. Had a mess to clean up. Silence outside grew louder as backup arrived. Darius glanced over his shoulder, mind racing. Protocol demanded he detain Leonard, ask questions, fill out an endless mountain of paperwork. But instincts, the ones that had kept him alive through 2 tours overseas, warned against treating Leonard like a common suspect. You got somewhere safe to be tonight? Darius asked instead, voice low. Leonard's eyes flicked toward the broken front windows, the glass sparkling like a carpet of diamonds under the school's emergency lights. No such thing anymore, Leonard said. Darius nodded slowly. Then maybe stick close, whoever sent these guys. They won't like losing. Leonard said nothing. He just stepped past Darius, the mop tapping the floor gently as he walked. By morning, the town would be buzzing with rumors. A break-in, vandalism, some vague, sanitized version of the truth the school board would craft to calm parents. The real story, the attempted cartel hit thwarted by a janitor, would stay hidden in the dark corners, where such things belonged. Leonard didn't sleep that night. He sat at the small kitchen table of his modest home, a cup of black coffee steaming untouched at his elbow. In front of him, laid out with meticulous care, were the weapons he hadn't needed in years. Old instincts awakened with ease, hands moving with muscle memory, checking firing pins, cleaning barrels, sharpening blades. There would be more. Miko Sanchez was a symptom, not the disease. Leonard had spent enough of his life studying organizations like the one he'd tangled with tonight. They wouldn't just write it off. They would escalate, retaliate. And worse, they would start looking deeper. He thought about the kids. About Sofia Rivera's wide grin when she got a gold star on her science project. About Principal McKinney's stubborn loyalty to her staff. Her willingness to fight for every dollar to keep programs alive. About the life he had painstakingly built from the ashes of who he used to be. He couldn't let them burn it all down. When the first knock came, Leonard didn't move immediately. He let the second knock sound, and the third. A pattern, a code from a life few people remembered anymore. Leonard rose silently, weapon tucked discreetly at his waistband, and opened the door a crack. Standing there was a ghost, or rather the next best thing to one. She was older now, lines at the corners of her sharp green eyes, but the stance was unmistakable. Emily Cross, former handler, former ally, maybe the only person left alive who really knew what Leonard Tramiel was capable of. "You're a hard man to find, Leo," she said, using the name only she had ever dared. Leonard stepped back without a word, letting her inside. She closed the door quietly behind her. "You stirred up a hornet's nest," Emily said without preamble. "Words already bouncing around off dark channels. Big noise about a missing unit and someone called the Ghost Custodian." Leonard snorted. "Catchy." Emily's smile was tight. "They know it's you. Maybe not your name yet, but they know they lost a team tonight, and that kind of embarrassment doesn't sit well." Leonard leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded across his chest. Emily hesitated. "Bad, real bad. And it's not just the local thugs anymore. You cost a lot of people a lot of money years ago. Some of them are still alive. Some of them are still angry." Leonard's mouth tightened. "You came here for something," he said. Emily nodded. "Protection detail. Witness extraction. We can get you out of here before the next wave hits." Leonard looked around his kitchen, the battered cabinets, the worn-out rug, the faded photos of places he'd seen but no longer called home. "No," he said simply. Emily frowned. "Leo, don't be stupid. You can't mop your way out of this one." Leonard shook his head. "This town doesn't deserve the war that's coming," he said. "But if it's coming anyway, it's going to end here." Emily studied him for a long moment, then sighed and dropped a thin folder onto the table. "At least take this," she said. "Intel on who they might send next. Names, faces, locations." Leonard picked up the folder, flipping it open. Photos clipped neatly inside. Men and women trained like he had been trained. Weapons experts, snipers, interrogators. Not thugs anymore. Professionals. Good. He needed a real fight. Emily turned to leave, but paused at the door. "For what it's worth," she said, "some of us always knew you wouldn't stay retired." Leonard didn't answer. He watched her disappear into the night, her shadow swallowed up by the quiet streets of Westbridge. He closed the door and locked it behind her, then turned back to the folder. Tomorrow would be another battle. Not one fought for governments or agencies. Not one fought for flags. Tomorrow, Leonard Tramiel would fight for something far more important. The morning air was sharp and clean, betraying none of the tension curling through the heart of Westbridge. Leonard Tramiel stood outside the school, arms folded, his janitor's key ring clipped to his belt like always, a perfect picture of harmlessness. But everything about him was different now. His posture was tighter, his gaze heavier. Every teacher, every child that walked past him was quietly catalogued, assessed, protected. Inside his jacket, secured in a hidden shoulder rig, rested a compact pistol. Another knife was tucked into his boot. He moved with the smooth efficiency of a man wearing armor no one else could see. Word of the vandalism had spread fast. Parents pulled their kids close as they hurried them inside. Whispers filled the air like the buzzing of unseen bees. The police had issued statements about an isolated incident, about safety measures being doubled. Most believed it. A few, the ones who knew how the world really worked, didn't. Leonard caught Principal Laura McKinney's eye as she crossed the parking lot, clutching a folder to her chest like a shield. Her face was calm but tight, jaw clenched in a way that betrayed her fear. She paused beside Leonard at the entrance. "Rough night?" she asked, her voice pitched low. Leonard gave a slow nod. "We'll get through it," he said simply. Laura hesitated, then leaned closer. You're not just a janitor, are you?" Leonard almost smiled. Almost. Instead, he just touched the brim of his cap in a mock salute and pushed the door open for her. In the office, he set to work installing the last of his hidden countermeasures. Motion sensors tucked behind the trophy case, a silent alarm keyed to his phone, a few more tripwires strung in the places most likely to funnel attackers. He wasn't waiting for them to come. He was welcoming them. By noon, the tension in town was tangible. Leonard could feel it under his skin, the way an animal senses a coming storm. His eyes flicked constantly toward the street beyond the playground fence. Then, just after the last lunch bell rang, he saw it. 2 black SUVs creeping down Main Street, windows tinted to illegal levels, moving too slow to be casual, too predatory. Leonard moved. He slipped through the maintenance hallways, activating secondary locks on the side doors. He radioed Darius Cole using the simple burner phone he'd been given by Emily the night before. No explanation, just a time and a code word. Darius's reply was a single word. "Understood." Leonard moved toward the gymnasium where the children were gathering for afternoon recess in case of rain. Principal McKinney stood at the entrance, clipboard in hand, checking names, organizing the chaos. Leonard tapped her lightly on the arm. "Keep them inside," he murmured. "Lock the doors." Laura's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't argue. She signaled 2 teachers nearby and began herding the students inside under the pretense of a safety drill. No panic, no screaming, just a quiet, urgent flow. Leonard turned and faced the front doors. The SUVs had parked outside now. 4 men exited the first vehicle, 4 from the second, 8 total. No tattoos, no flashy weapons. Professional, precise. The leader stepped forward, a tall man with hair cropped short and scars along his knuckles, the kind that came from years of fighting the wrong kind of wars. His eyes swept the building, calculating. Leonard knew the type. Mercenaries, freelance enforcers hired when the cartel needed ghosts to clean up their mess. The leader spotted Leonard standing inside the doors and smiled coldly. Leonard let the mop rest casually against the wall and opened the doors himself. The leader walked up the steps, his men fanning out behind him. "You Leonard Tramiel?" the leader asked, voice flat, accent faint but unmistakable. Borderland Spanish with a touch of East Coast city. Leonard gave a slight nod. "You're coming with us," the leader said. "No need to make this messy." Leonard's hands were empty. His stance was relaxed. He looked like nothing more than a worn-out man trying to keep a school clean. But his eyes told a different story. "Not today," Leonard said. For a heartbeat, neither man moved. Then the leader flicked his fingers, an order. The two closest mercenaries surged forward. Leonard reacted faster than anyone expected. His boot slid across the floor, sweeping up the mop, wielding it like a quarterstaff. The first mercenary caught a spinning strike across the wrist, sending his pistol flying. Leonard pivoted, the mop head slamming into the second man's chest, knocking the wind from his lungs. Gunfire erupted behind them as Darius Cole and two other local deputies opened fire from cover positions Leonard had planned hours before. The mercenaries scattered, caught off guard by the sudden counterattack. Leonard moved through the chaos with surgical precision. He took one man down with a knee to the gut and a savage elbow to the back of the neck. Another tried to flank him, only to trip one of Leonard's hidden wires and crash to the floor. As Darius dropped another attacker with a clean shoulder shot, shouting commands to his deputies to secure the wounded. The leader realized the trap too late. He backpedaled, weapon drawn, firing wildly as he retreated toward the SUVs. Leonard pursued, low and fast, closing the distance. The leader fired again, a wild shot that grazed Leonard's shoulder. Pain flared hot, but Leonard didn't stop. He grabbed a fallen pistol from the ground, leveling it at the leader. "Drop it!" Leonard barked. For a second the leader hesitated, calculating, measuring. Then he dropped his weapon and raised his hands slowly. Behind him sirens wailed closer. More police, more witnesses. It was over. Leonard kicked the leader's weapon away and forced him to his knees, as Darius sprinted over, cuffs already in hand. As the deputies rounded up the survivors, Leonard leaned against the school's brick wall, breathing hard, blood seeping from his shoulder wound. Principal McKinney appeared at the glass doors, her face pale but composed. Kids peeked out from behind her, wide-eyed and silent. Leonard straightened, wiped the blood from his hand, and gave them a nod. They were safe. And if anyone else came hunting, they would find out the same thing Miko's cartel and these mercenaries had learned. Leonard Tramiel wasn't just a janitor. He was the guardian they never saw coming. And he was just getting started. The following morning, the school felt different. Not broken, not bruised. Alive. Kids shuffled through the hallways with the same restless energy as always. But the fear that had briefly gripped Westbridge had lifted, replaced by something more enduring. Trust. A deep, wordless belief that someone was watching out for them, someone they didn't fully understand, but instinctively knew they could depend on. Leonard Tramiel stood by the main entrance again, his janitor's uniform freshly laundered, the familiar weight of his keyring swinging gently at his side. His arm was bandaged beneath his shirt where the graze wound throbbed, a low reminder of how close things had come. He didn't mind the pain. It was a small price to pay. The front doors swung open, and Sofia Rivera, clutching a homemade thank-you card so large it took up half her torso, beamed up at him. "Mio," she chirped, "we made you something." Leonard crouched slowly, one knee creaking with the effort, and accepted the oversized card with both hands. On it, dozens of tiny, eager handprints overlapped in a collage of bright colors, and in the center, written in big, bold letters, "Thank you for protecting us." For a moment, Leonard said nothing, just stared at the messily perfect card. His throat tightened unexpectedly. He swallowed against it and looked back up at Sofia, who waited with the pure, unfiltered patience only a child could offer. "You tell everyone," Leonard said, his voice low but steady, "that it was my honor." Sophia's smile widened even more, and she raced off down the hall, holding up the card like a trophy. Leonard stood, tucking the card carefully under one arm. Behind him, footsteps approached. Darius Cole, dressed in full uniform today, badge gleaming on his chest, stopped beside him. "Town council's meeting tonight," Darius said, voice casual but loaded with unspoken meaning. "There's talk of making a public announcement, something about a community hero." Leonard snorted quietly. "I'm not much for speeches." Darius smiled, one side of his mouth lifting higher than the other. "Doesn't matter, you've already made yours loud enough." Leonard shifting the card under his arm. "In the cleanup?" Darius nodded. "The cartel won't be coming back. Word's out. You're off limits. Too much trouble." Leonard turned his head slightly, skeptical. "And the ones higher up?" Darius shrugged. "Even bad men know when they've hit a brick wall. You're a legend now, Leonard. Sometimes legends are more dangerous than soldiers." Leonard thought about that for a long moment. Maybe it was true. Maybe fear was enough this time. He hoped so. As the final bell rang and the first graders erupted from their classrooms like a flood, Leonard blended into the flow of the day. He returned to his rounds, tightening bolts, mopping the already clean floor, fixing a loose doorknob in the teacher's lounge. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. It mattered. Later that evening, just as the sun dipped low and set the town's modest rooftops on fire with gold, Leonard sat alone on the front steps of the school. The building behind him was silent, bathed in the warm afterglow of a town settling into peace. He sipped slowly from a battered thermos of coffee, watching the shadows grow longer. A rusted pickup truck pulled into the parking lot, and Emily Cross stepped out. She wore jeans and a leather jacket now, hair pulled back in a simple braid. She approached without hurry, a small paper bag swinging from one hand. Leonard raised an eyebrow as she sat down next to him and offered the bag. "Apple turnovers," she said, "from McKenna's Bakery. Figured you deserved better than cold coffee." Leonard accepted the bag with a small nod and pulled one of the pastries free. Flaky, sweet, still slightly warm. He took a slow bite, savoring it. "I thought you were gone," he said after a moment. Emily leaned back on her elbows, looking up at the slowly darkening sky. "Was. Figured I'd check in one last time before disappearing again." Leonard chewed thoughtfully. "You're staying, aren't you?" he said quietly. Emily chuckled. "Maybe. Town's nice. People are nice. You're still a stubborn old bastard, though." Leonard smiled faintly around another bite of pastry. They sat in silence for a long while, two old warriors resting at the edge of a battlefield that no one else even knew existed. No orders, no missions. Just the simple, profound knowledge that they had fought for something good, and won. After a while, Emily broke the quiet. "You know," she said, "you could do more here than mop floors." Leonard finished the turnover and brushed crumbs from his hands. "I already am," he said. Emily glanced sidewise at him, reading the weight behind his words. Protecting, watching, guarding the people who didn't even know how close danger had come. Leonard Tramiel hadn't retired. He had simply found a new post, a new war worth fighting. A small town, a school full of bright futures, a community that deserved the peace he'd spilled blood to secure. And he would protect it in the only way he knew how, quietly, relentlessly, without fanfare. As the last of the sunset bled away into twilight, Leonard rose to his feet, stretching out the tightness from his legs. He tucked the empty paper bag into his jacket pocket and offered Emily a hand up. She took it without hesitation. They stood together, side by side, facing the town, bathed in the first stars of night. A place worth fighting for. A place worth staying for. Leonard Tramiel had finally come home, and this time he wasn't running from anything. He was standing guard. Forever, if he had to.